Hey YouTube, just putting together a Petra top 5 video for you today. So this was a very tough one, tough decisions to make, but I think I've got it. This is going to be my top 5 favorite Petra albums. And so we're gonna go from 5 and work our way up to 1. So starting at number 5, I'm going to say is the self-titled album. And this is the original first pressing on Myrrh Records, and as you can see, it is signed on both sides. And I'll show you the vinyl on this one. This one shows you that it's the first pressing, is it has the green Myrrh label. So then there was a second one that was on the orange Myrrh label, and then later, I guess in the 80s, they did an A&M pressing, but this is the very first pressing. So cool story about this one is my pastor and I, we got this record, around the same time, got the very first pressing. We talked, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could get this signed by the 4 original members? And so my pastor went to work on it. He started reaching out to these guys. And so first what we did was we were able to send these off in the mail and get the drummer, Bill Glover, to sign it. And so we sent them off to him, and he gladly signed them for us. But then there was like an issue in the mail getting them back because he didn't take the original label off, and so it had his new label and our old label off, and so then it kept getting sent back and forth between 2 states for like 2 weeks, and then we had to get it straightened out. We finally got it back, and then my pastor was able to reach out to these other 2 guys, was John DeGroff and Greg Hogue. And so we made a drive all the way up to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we ended up having dinner with these guys. And these were just the nicest guys right here. They were just so cool, told us stories, gladly signed our records, all that, and broke bread with them. And then the tough one was getting together with Bob Hartman here. I guess he just wasn't getting emails, but he finally got the email and responded, and we ended up driving to Tennessee and met with him at Cracker Barrel of all places. And it was insane. So it was my pastor and I, and we're sitting there, and my pastor's sitting across from us, and like Bob Hartman is like sitting here to my left, and I'm like just sitting here this close to this legend, and he's sitting here eating roast beef for lunch and telling us all these great stories. I asked him about had he had any encounters with Larry Norman back in the day, and he told us this awesome story about him like picking him up or having to drive him to the airport or something. And it was just such a cool story, and it's just wild sitting next to a man. It's like this Grammy winner and endless Dove Awards, and just all that he's done for Christian music. And he was just, so humble, and sat there and just talked to us one-on-one. And so, he signed these records for us, and we got it signed on the front, and then we wanted the signatures on the back by their faces, so it made it complete. And he also signed my vinyl copy of the album On Fire, and it looks really cool because he signed it right on the blade. But yeah, just really great guys, and it was such a cool time. And this was back in like late 2020, early 2021, something like that. It was still around when things were real crazy with COVID. But yeah, this album is so cool, like especially like if you're into like a southern rock sound. It really has like an Allman Brothers kind of sound to it. Top-notch guitar playing, and it's just a really good album. And I mean, what a way to start off the band. And then here I have it on cassette, and this is a sealed copy. You can probably still see the wrapper on it, and it has a price tag on it. I never opened it just because, I mean, what's the point? I mean, I do listen to cassettes, but I'm like, man, this thing's sealed. I'm just gonna leave it this way. So now we're gonna move on to my number 4, and that is going to be the Beyond Belief album. And this is the, and I'm getting a glare. This is a Girder reissue, and this one has I believe it's the orange vinyl. Really cool looking. So it's kind of a orangey yellow color. You can see past the glare. But yeah, this album is, I think it came out in 1990, and it just really has the sound of that time. So, going into the late 80s, early 90s, and, you know, rock music just had a certain tone to it. You know, I'm sure the type of instruments they were using. And I mean, John Schlitt's vocals were just so good at that time. He could really hit these high notes. I mean, he still can, but just what they were doing at this time. And, you know, some of the songs on here that are my favorites. It's tough, but I'm going to have to say my favorite song on the album is going to be a toss-up between Last Days and the song Creed. Those are my favorite songs on the album. Of course, Beyond Belief's a cool song. I'm on the Rock. And then, you know, there's many others, Armed and Dangerous. But yeah, those are some of my favorites. And to go along with it, I do have the CD, and it's in a sealed long box. This one has never been opened. I do have an opened copy. Actually, I've got two of these, so I opened one of the long boxes and saved it, put it up, but I left this one sealed. Just thought it was a cool collectible. And then I do have it on cassette, and you know, it's in one of the more clear looking gray shells. So yeah, going on to number 3. My number 3 favorite Petra album is going to be Beat the System. And this one is a cool import pressing. You know, I'm here in the United States, so this one here is a Kingsway pressing, and I'll show you the vinyl. That's really the telltale sign. As you see the label on the vinyl, it says Kingsway Music. But yeah, this album, it's, you know, it's the epitome of 80s rock sound. You know, 1984, you got the synthesizers and all that, and just the tone that they had. But let's go over some of the tracks on here. So you got you got the title track, Beat the System, Computer Brains. You know, had a lot of different sounds going on in the background. Almost had some stuff like you might have heard on the Michael Jackson Thriller album going on in the background. The song Clean, It Is Finished. That song is one of my favorites. Voice in the Wind, that's a cool, just laid back song. Another remake of God Gave Rock and Roll to You. I actually prefer the older version that was on the Come and Join Us album. That version of God Gave Rock and Roll to You is my favorite version. But this one's good too. Witch Hunt, Hollow Eyes, Speak to the Sky, and then Adonai. The song Adonai, it's a great song, and I actually prefer the remake that they did of that on the Back to the Rock album. But yeah, Beat the System, and then here it is on cassette, and it's got one of the clear shells on it. Man, I get a glare from that window. But you know, with cassettes, you know, a lot of, depending on where you got them from, tape clubs or stores and things, sometimes you get a white shell or a tan shell. Up in Canada, a lot of them had a black plastic shell, and then, you know, you had these more clear ones with the gray inside. And then this is the original pressing of the CD, and as you can see down here, it says Sony Music on it. And what's cool about these is, you know, it's the very first pressing. Right there it says Made in Japan. So they, even though I guess all the artwork and stuff was made here in the United States, they were, I guess, outsourcing getting the disc made in Japan, which they're always known for making, you know, great products. You know, people really seek out, you know, Japanese pressings of stuff. So I think that that's pretty cool. I had the other pressing of it. I guess it was a later pressing, and then I come across this one, and I had to have it. You know, that's just me. I love getting all these different versions and variants. You know, different labels and all that kind of stuff. So I've kind of lost track where I'm at here. I guess I'm coming up on number 2. So my number 2 pick is not a favorite among a lot of Petra fans, but number 2 is going to be Back to the Street. And there's just something special about this album to me. And this is actually a United Kingdom pressing. The labels on these pretty much look the same. So it's like before they were doing Kingsway, and then they had a Star Song United Kingdom label. But so when I first started getting into Petra, which really wasn't that long ago, I would say over the last few years, you know, maybe since probably around 2020, I really dug this album. I started listening to it because I didn't know a whole lot about them. I knew about them since I was a kid, but I didn't listen to them back in the 80s. And then, my pastor turned me on to them. And I think a lot of times I wasn't into Petra because the songs that I was choosing, like off of YouTube, just to get samples or whatever, wasn't necessarily their best ones. And then he turned me on to tracks like, Bema Seed and Second Wind and ones like that. And I'm just like, whoa, this really has like, classic, 70s Foreigner vibes and things like that. So I started digging through, and then I was looking for something. I wanted something that had a good 80s sound to it. And then I found the Back to the Street album on YouTube, and I listened to it a lot while I was at work. And so it's become one of my favorite albums. And what's funny is, I guess back in the day, I was kind of a closet Duran Duran fan. So a lot of the stuff on here kind of gives me those vibes of like mid 80s Duran Duran, especially like with what they was doing with the bass and some of the guitar riffs and of course the keyboards. To me, it's just a fantastic album. And here it is on cassette. There's, man, look at that glare. 2 different ones, and then you can see that the spine on these are different. One's got the white, one's got the black. And then, so this one has the kind of off-white shell, and then this one has the clear with the gray. And yeah, just a killer album. And here is the original pressing CD on the digipack that opens up, kind of like an album. And the same deal here, it's a made in Japan disc. So there's Back to the Street for you. And I do have a couple other pressings of it. I got one from a pastor. It's really cool. It's a US Star Song pressing, but it's a promo copy, and it has the Go promo stamp. And if you hold the vinyl up to the light, it's translucent, and you can see it's kind of a golden color when you see through it. So now this is bringing us up to my number 1, and I'm sure it's this case with a lot of you out there, and it is the More Power to You album. I mean, you just can't beat this album. And Greg Voles on vocals. I mean, they were just really hitting that sweet spot right here. And the album before it was Never Say Die, and then they go into this, and it's just so strong. And this one's also a Kingsway pressing. You can see that there. And yeah, so I've got the US pressing as well, but I don't know, I just got turned on to these Kingsway labels, and I bought as many of them as I could find. And they sound really good too. So I don't know, I'd have to compare them side by side on 2 different turntables to see if maybe the US sounds any better or the Kingsway sounds better, but these do sound great quality. The covers are a little thinner. I've noticed with most European records, especially the original pressings from 80s and 90s, they were really thin. And then once you got into the early 90s, the vinyl themselves was like super flimsy. I'd actually found my pastor Beyond Belief on vinyl, a UK pressing some years back, and man, that whole thing is just wobbly. But they sound great. And here is as far as I know, this is the original CD pressing. And then you got to turn it upside down to see the back because they flipped them that way. And then there's the discs on Star Song. My son has the anniversary version of this. I don't know if it was a 25th or a 30th anniversary CD of this. It wasn't the Girder version, it was before that one. And then it has some extra live tracks on it. And then here is a sealed cassette, and this is the Girder version that you can get on Girder Records, and looks like the cassette itself is like blue. I haven't opened it, just thought it was cool to have sealed, but I love what they did with the artwork. Every time these guys do something with the artwork, it always is just like next level, and you can see the titles on there really well. But yeah, those are my top 5 Petra records. Of course, they had other great albums. It was really hard to pick 5, but I had to balance it between the different eras because, you've got the 70s era before Voles was in it, then you had the Voles era, then you had the John Schlitt era. So I tried to balance it out the best that I could. I would have loved to have had Not of This World in here, and even This Means War, but I do listen to these albums all the time. And one just for honorable mention that is just something cool and rare that I have is this cassette. And it's Petra Live And let me see, that's Urbana Assembly of God, September 22nd, 1979. And this is like, I guess what they call it, a house tape. And as you can see, it's one of these really old cassettes. And so it sounds like they recorded straight off of the soundboard at this church. And it's got Voles on vocals. And I think the drummer they had at the time, I don't even know his name, but it wasn't Bill Glover and it wasn't Louis Weaver. It was somebody that was just kind of a fill-in drummer there because they had like a couple of years there where they was just really going through some different members. But whenever I found this album or this cassette, I bought it not really knowing what it was, and of course I knew it was Petra, but I didn't know what was going to be on it, the quality, but the quality is excellent. And they do perform songs on here off of the Wash Is Whiter Than album, because this is 1979, so it's right at that time. And they perform some, some worship songs that aren't even Petra songs, because, I guess they was doing a church show. And I seen on John Schlitt's website that he has this list on there that lists like every Petra concert that's ever been performed that they know of. And I didn't see this one listed on there, so I emailed him, told him what I had and what it was. And whoever runs that site, with the list, I don't think it's John Schlitt. He apparently was able to reach out to the guy that played drums on this part of the tour and said, hey, is this legit? Is this a show that you did? And he remembered it. I don't know if he had some kind of any paperwork or whatever, a flyer for it, but apparently this drummer verified it and they added this show to the list. So I just thought it was a cool piece of Petra memorabilia and history. But yeah, thanks for tuning in and checking out my top 5 Petra albums. God bless.